This is a mini episode because we just couldn't wait to talk about Elvis. So, as the king would say, a little less conversation, a little more action.
Hell yeah. Lovely way to put it. Yeah. Maybe a little palate cleanser. So we're usually recommending movies to you, but this is a little bit of a first reactions episode where, like you said, the movies that you and I are very excited to see and didn't want to wait to talk about. And it got me thinking of back to the Suncoast days. We'd work at Suncoast all day, slinging DVDs, and then we'd walk over to AMC Yorktown and watch movies, and then talk about them outside the theater. And it was just an ongoing parade of movie debate all day, and I loved it.
I guess that's the best part about working in a mall, right? You've got everything in close vicinity. It's like, all right, after we get off of work and we've made some money talking about movies, slinging DVDs all day, let's head over to the movie theater and just like literally walk there and see whatever's playing. And if it is like those days, you and I, as we're in different places geographically, we still got out this weekend and saw Elvis, which I have to say, I was so excited to see it. And it did not disappoint in any way, shape, or form for me. I loved it.
Ah, love to hear that, man. I love the excitement. Yeah, man, I know you've always been a huge Elvis fan. And I'm excited to hear a little bit more on your thoughts of the movie. This movie, I mean, I had an awesome time watching it. I was most excited, obviously, to get a lot of good Elvis singing in this movie, but I was pretty intrigued by Baz Luhrmann as the director. And so I was expecting the chaotic but controlled kind of style of his previous movies. And this one definitely didn't disappoint on that level at all.
Chaotic but controlled is a great way to say Baz Luhrmann's style, and to kind of expand on that. As soon as I started seeing the posters and I saw the rhinestones and the TCB and like all of the sort of gaudy parts of Elvis's career, you know, his later career, and I suppose the early part was theatrical, right? It was a little, unrehearsed and like nobody had ever seen before. But, you know, as it kind of rolls into the 70s, just like a lot of people's careers, things change. And for Elvis, it was very, very much about the glitz and the glamour and the suits and the Vegas style. And I was so excited that Baz Luhrmann was going to be doing this, because I was like, who better to exploit the gaudiness of Elvis's later career and make it cool, you know, which I think is like what he did here. He made Elvis and his later career cool again. Opened this movie up to an audience for people to be excited about Elvis for the first time. Maybe they had never even heard of him. I mean, that's possible these days. You have an artist who died in the 70s, late 70s there at 42 years old. If you can even wrap your head around the fact that at 42 years old, Elvis was gone off this earth after such a big legacy. He could possibly be forgotten if there aren't movies like this being made.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely right. I think a lot of younger generations are not really familiar with Elvis at all. He definitely seems just kind of like a vacancy there. It's like his voice may be like familiar, but the idea of him as like this, like the most famous person in the world at the time, probably definitely not the case for younger generations. So.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing, you know, if you think about, if you followed on social media or even before, just kind of what happened with Graceland and that they made it up to be a museum. I mean, Elvis as a brand has continually been fed by the family, right? Priscilla and Lisa Marie and everybody just making sure that people don't forget him, because he was such a huge, gigantic star that meant so much to so many people. And the songs are undeniable, of course. As you said earlier, I am a gigantic Elvis fan. I always have been. So this movie did so much for that. I also thought that he went to an interesting place by being able to talk a little bit about things that weren't factual, for instance, in the film, and I'm going to try my best not to give any spoilers, but in the film, there are some things that did happen. And, as any great story about an artist and the times that they live in, it's good to remember the circumstances surrounded that career. So, for instance, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and sort of what it did to Elvis and what he was thinking about. But maybe as a big, gigantic star, he couldn't really say much, but it explores maybe what he did with his career and sort of the songs that he sang, and being a spiritual man, how all of those things came out, even if he didn't have to make some statement like most people think they need to do these days about every single thing. I think there's a line in there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure you know what I'm about to say, that, if a man can't say something, sing it, right? And so that's what that sort of scene that has to surround the Bobby Kennedy stuff. They have a lot about, colored ropes lining for colored people, and then for whites. They do a lot about race in this film that I believe is exploring sort of what Elvis would have thought if you had been able to speak to him about it. And I thought that was an interesting thing to do, because obviously so many people for so long have talked about Elvis and that he has basically been ripping off Black music, right? That's something that has not gone away. And I think this movie kind of says, yes, but he was just a fan, and this got really, really popular. And of course, it was a different time. And so I was wondering, did you catch a lot of those things there? Things, again, that aren't necessarily factual, like timing. I had heard that scene that I'm talking about with Bobby Kennedy, actually, Bobby Kennedy didn't get assassinated, but was more so in rehearsals and not, the day before he actually sang that last number in the 68 comeback special.
Yeah, I mean, those details I'm not up on, but generally, my understanding of Elvis has a lot of, come through like movies, like Jarmusch movies. There's actually an extended scene about Elvis in the movie that we covered in the past, Coffee and Cigarettes, where they talk about Elvis's quote unquote ripping off of Black artists. And that's obviously been a narrative that I don't think most people actually think that anymore. I mean, they kind of recognize that he grew up poor in the South and was obsessed with Black gospel and blues at a very young age. And it was that's what I loved about this movie. It kind of had its cake and eats it too, where it's kind of tries to have it both ways with Tom Hanks, who I'm definitely excited to talk about because his performance is bananas in this movie. He's got that scene right when he's discovering Elvis. It's kind of a laugh out loud scene because it's so like over the top when he's realizing that this new artist that all the kids are listening to is white. So he's basically just like saying it to himself. He's white. And it's like, yeah, this is a musician that can be marketable in a very racist time in the 50s. But then it spends the rest of the movie showing Elvis being a true admirer of all the Black artists and being very close with them. And it just kind of has it both without like really saying like too much on it, but like kind of like staying on the surface level of it without taking a too firm of a stance, which I don't think you really could take like a hardcore stance either way in a movie like this big, at least.
Yeah, I mean, you're spanning decades to tell a story. You have to touch on things. I had heard, and you had texted me about Baz Luhrmann actually having a director's cut that was about an hour and a half or something like that of footage that didn't make the film. I would love to see a director's cut of this. Can you imagine?
That's right. I forgot about that, actually. Now that I've seen it, the idea that there's a version that it has another hour and a half of footage. I mean, it makes sense. Like with the pace of this movie, it's like it's nonstop for 2 hours and 40 minutes. And I mean, even if it feels like long, which I don't think it really does, like it just moves at such a quick pace that like I could definitely see the 4-hour version in my mind.
Well, even think about, exploring a lot about the girls and the way that his sexual energy was eaten up by the ladies. And obviously Elvis has had, I'm sure mistresses and things like that have been exploited over the years in books and tell-all stuff. But they didn't really go into any of that. And I thought that was a good move because this movie it was definitely very geared towards Elvis and his legacy and who he was and what that meant to music and life as we know it. I don't think it needed to spend too much time on, his romantic life. And think about any time that you've seen a movie about, a main character that didn't need the romance involved. Right. And I like the way that they talked about Priscilla in the film. I like the way they talked about his daughter, and that, that scene that's just so heartbreaking in the limo as he's getting on the plane. I'll always love you. I cried during a lot of this film, man. That's how much I love the story of Elvis and sort of rock and roll. I'm just such a music fan. And kind of understanding, look at all the greats that have gone based on addictions and things like that. I mean, I know this is a mini episode, but we could talk for hours on this topic. There's so much to cover on Elvis. I also love that you want to talk about Tom Hanks, because to me, you can never do wrong with having Tom Hanks in a movie. He's continually surprising me with how great he is. His range was amazing as Tom Parker. I had known about the Tom Parker stuff and how he screwed Elvis. Everybody has, but it also is amazing, especially in that trailer. When you first see that trailer and he says, "We're the same, you and I. We're two kids, that are outcasts." And it's like, damn, the connection, just a lot. That's pretty heavy. That we're really the same, and they couldn't be too different. Especially even with looks, right? He's this like older guy that's doesn't even speak English very well. And then you've got Elvis, who's a suave, handsome, young person, but they're combined, they're for life. Everybody knew Tom Parker was going to be Elvis's manager, and he couldn't escape him, of course, as we find out in the story. He had been doing a lot of bad, shady things behind the scenes that Elvis didn't even get to know about when he was alive.
Yeah, the showman. So how familiar were you with the Colonel Tom?
I mean, I definitely knew on the surface all the level things that, I guess the headline bits, right? All of the things that were bad for Elvis and that he couldn't leave. I knew going into this that Elvis never was able to leave the country based on Colonel Tom Parker, which is a huge deal, of course, in the movie when they talk about Elvis and how he wants to spread his wings, but he just can't. And he doesn't even really know why. It's a classic manipulation, to be honest with you.
Yeah. No, and it plays it out pretty well. Because, I was pretty unfamiliar with a lot of the information, like you said, just really the surface level kind of their characters' dynamics. And so, obviously, you don't have to take the movie's narrative for fact or anything, but a lot of it was new to me, and that kind of was making it pretty interesting. But Tom Hanks as the Colonel, what did you think about his performance specifically?
I mean, I just was really, really blown away by, again, how manipulative he was he did such a great job without saying so much. Like, you didn't need to hear him say, you need to sign this contract, Elvis, or, I'm not going to be your manager. He basically got Elvis to perform in those Vegas residencies without ever telling Elvis that, he needed him to, and even like the fact that a guy like Elvis could possibly be broke, it shows you how much he had no clue what was going on. He was working so hard. There's scenes in this film, especially when there's that performance when they tell him not to do the wiggle and Elvis kind of denies the Colonel for the first time. That scene is going to win Austin Butler a Academy Award. I have no doubt about it. The way that you see him, and there's that underneath the curtain and you can see Tom Hanks looking at him and he is just singing his heart out and he's got this expression on his face. I could not have been more engaged with that scene. And I've been on the stage, of course, with my band, and I can understand what it's like to really be in the moment. Austin Butler, I don't know where that performance came from, what part inside he understood, but he really understood what it was like. And I was just blown away by that scene.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it took me like halfway through the movie. I'm like thinking to myself this whole time, like, who is this actor? Like, because I didn't recognize him. I definitely didn't recognize the name, and then I finally had to Google it and where he was from. And it was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is what he was from. That I had kind of recognized his face as Tex from the Manson family.
Getting his ass kicked by Brad Pitt.
Right, exactly. And then in that great scene at the end, obviously, I had to rewatch the part when Leo comes out in his car and is yelling at him when they're parked right in front of his place. But yeah, it's like his manner, and he's such a different looking character in that. And he, I mean, I thought he was fantastic in this movie, actually. You know, the obviously the physicality of it there with you. I don't know who was doing the actual singing.
There's at times Austin Butler does sing the songs.
Okay.
Cool. If you look at, that's another thing to talk about, just the soundtrack in general. Like, I'm not a big fan of redoing original songs that you love. I am really not, but it's done a lot for Elvis in general. Like that little less conversation, a little more act, that was done, I believe, for Soderbergh, right? And when they did Ocean's 11s.
Yeah.
And that skyrocketed Elvis again back to like kind of being in the consciousness of the world, because it was a remix, right? And it was so fun, like a classic song that you knew, but like in this kind of cool new way. This is exactly what's happening here with the amazing roster of talent that they have on the soundtrack, and reimagining these songs in ways you'd never heard them before. And then, of course, marketing genius going out to a bunch of people that would have never heard these songs based on these new artists. They're finding out about Elvis for the first time through the soundtrack. I mean, it hits on every level, this movie. It's amazing what they were able to pull off.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. Burning Love, I had to listen to that a couple of times. It's definitely my favorite Elvis song. I don't know if
I love it. It's that's a little bit like later Elvis when
that's what it sounds like to me. Like, I mean, it's obviously not his early stuff, but there's something about the structure of that song. It almost like I could believe like it was produced like years after, and just because of the structure and how clean it is. But yeah, for whatever reason, that song always got me. But
I mean, I saw the '68 comeback special in theaters about 3 years ago or something, when it was Fathom Events, I think, does that, where they like reintroduce something. And I saw that with my girlfriend. I'm so glad I did, because it was such a nice thing to like see that in the theater, and then I'd seen it before, of course, but then to go and see this film in the theater was kind of like a cool Elvis, like, let's see the real version, and then let's see the acting. And then, of course, we can't give too much away, but like they do show Elvis, the real Elvis, in this film a few times, which was out of character for Baz Luhrmann, in my opinion. It was very, very clear that he's a huge Elvis fan. I think this was such like a love song to Elvis, in my opinion, by him.
Yeah, I didn't see, I mean, speaking of Luhrmann, so like, I mean, I saw Romeo and Juliet when it first came out, along with Moulin Rouge, and I never saw Great Gatsby.
Yeah, man.
Are you down with that one?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. I mean, come on. Yeah. It's just like, he knows how to really play up these characters that are just so charismatic, but flawed, right. And that's the thing about Gatsby as well. I mean, it's like, that movie is awesome. You got to see it. But I also recommend seeing the Robert Redford version, which is equally as kick-ass. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd seen clips from Gatsby, and I was kind of expecting a little bit of that with this, and definitely didn't disappoint. But yeah, like you said, you can definitely tell that Luhrmann is pretty obsessed with Elvis, the man, the myth. But that's what I was thinking of, like, while watching this, is like he's the king because he's the king. It's like his narrative that has like transcended since the 50s is what has kept him as the king of rock and roll. Whether or not like even younger generations even know who he is, but like he was definitely the most successful at kind of bridging. He certainly was not the only person bridging the gap between like country and blues and rock at all, but like he was by far the most successful. And that's just part of that narrative. Something that they don't really go into too much in the film. But again, I don't know if they do this because of time, but Elvis did go off to war. And, when that happened, he mentions it. And I don't know if you caught it in this film. It was very quick. They talk about how the Beatles kind of got back in there in the 60s. And that's the whole idea of the comeback special. Right. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that Elvis, when he went off to war and everything like that, he had to kind of come back to the the stage in a different way, and that was all what all the movies were and stuff like that. Because when he came back, it was a different generation. People were listening to the Beatles, but again, of course, there would be no Beatles without music like Elvis was making right before he left. And I believe that it's kind of a little false. It was nice. Again, I think you have to like have a little bit of suspension of belief in scenes, because he didn't go to war based on the fact that he had to go away because he was in trouble because he was doing the wiggle and stuff like that. He went away, I think. But again, I think sometimes it plays that card, because I think it's kind of like, is that kind of what Colonel Tom was putting in the minds of, the whole Elvis camp and manipulating it? So as an audience, you kind of like don't know sometimes. And I think that that's the point. I don't think that Baz Luhrmann is doing those things factually wrong on purpose. I think he's doing it so that you can kind of understand maybe what it might have been like for the characters at the time. And so, of course, he went because, he was drafted, and Colonel Tom spent a lot of time working to make sure he didn't go to actual war. But he did go to war. And so that halted his career a little bit, but then also found Priscilla, started a family, and, the rest is history there.
Yeah, man. Still taking it all in. I saw this just a couple of days ago, and I love, again, like pointing out the performances. I thought the performances were like by far the best part of the movie. I had like such a great time enjoying that, and obviously like all the other characters too, like the Little Richard performance.
Amazing.
Was so fun to watch. Little Richard's amazing, and so they do a great entire set of a song with him in it, and Elvis is just there in the audience, just like admiring him. It's so great. Yeah, no, I love that. And I also think that some of that stuff wasn't factually correct. I don't think Elvis had actually gone, to hang out with B.B. King I wouldn't expect it to be. Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, it was such a nice little moment because it could have happened. Right. Like that's the thing is like it's not like Elvis wasn't a fan or friendly with those people. It's just that they never probably did hang out that way. And for anybody seeing this for the performances, like you said, I just think that is something to make sure we put an asterisk on all the performances. It wasn't just Austin Butler, but like the person who played, and I have her name escapes me, the person who played his mother in the film looked so much like Elvis's mother. And also they did such a nice job of understanding the dynamic of Elvis and his mother and what happened to Elvis after she died, because they were very close in life, if you know anything about his life. And I think that's important to remember, that all of these characters in this film, the casting, I always watch the credits because I want to know who put these films together, and I saw the people who casted it and I was like, these people are getting an Academy Award. Like it was amazing.
Yeah. You think it's going to go far with the audience? It did well over the weekend, box office wise. You see,
I saw it beat out what was number one? Oh, Top Gun before, right? So I saw it beat out Top Gun for the number one spot.
Yeah, it was almost like a dead tie, which was actually great. I haven't seen that yet, but for the idea of Top Gun returning to the top of the box office is pretty unprecedented for movies these days.
I know. I brought my Elvis cup from Graceland today to talk about it. My other one that I actually did, that painting that you have of, it actually broke, and it was like the saddest day that I've ever kind of experienced, because it was my favorite mug. It's my favorite picture of Elvis. It was such like a cool vintage little mug, and it broke. And so I've been looking for one ever since. But yeah, I'm a fan, man. I'm just like, was so happy to see this film. I'm going to see it again. I saw it at the Los Feliz 3 over here, which was remarkably the first time that I'd seen a film there, just because of COVID and everything. It's nice. A vintage theater from the 30s that's down the street, and I enjoyed the theater so much. Who was there the day before doing a question and answer was Werner Herzog. I was one day late from seeing him. I saw it on social media. I was like, damn it, I would have been in attendance had I known, So that's the experience was amazing. I love going to the theater. Love seeing films in the theater. I know you're no stranger to going to see movies in the theater. You see them more than I do in the theater. But it was my money. I would give that movie my money anytime. Enjoyed the ride very much.
Yeah, man, I'm definitely right there with you. Like I said, I wasn't entirely sure going into it what I was going to get out of it, but it definitely exceeded my expectations.
Cool. I mean, I know this is a mini episode. Any final thoughts that you want to share, or, should we wrap this up?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I'm just enjoying this conversation. I'm looking at that painting that you just referenced. I have a Darren Vorel original up in my place, an Elvis portrait. And so that was an actual mug that you had, and that's what you painted? Okay. So I didn't realize, I thought it was maybe like your own design, but it was an actual coffee mug that you were painting.
Yeah, it was actually one morning, I think it was just right as the pandemic was starting or something. It was one of the first that I did to kind of get my jumpstart my painting career over there. So you've got an early rendition, and it was, of course, the King, because I think I named it Mornings with the King,
Yep. That sounds right. Yeah, no. So I'm definitely going to have to put that on our socials and let everybody check out, because it's an early one, but it's obviously a masterful one. Oh, thanks, I love having it here. It's fantastic.
I know you love coffee too, so I thought it was like kind of a perfect one. I know you're contemplating read your books while you have some coffee, so it kind of was like the perfect owner.
Just laid down my morning routine every day. So.
Yeah. But anybody who's listening, go check out the Elvis film. It really is worth it. It's worth the hype. Austin Butler does a fantastic job as Elvis. At times, he doesn't look like Elvis, but it's very rare. Most of the time, you're like, holy shit, that's Elvis. Like it could be like a split image. And you don't really get that from seeing the trailer sometimes. I was like, is this really going to be like Elvis? You got to see the film to really, really get the spirit of him as Elvis. And then you'll be like, at times, really thinking, holy shit, that's Elvis on stage. Like, he looks so much like him in the film. I don't know if you agree or not.
It's all in the persona, and he's definitely got it. He nailed it here.
Nailed it. So go see it. Check out the rest of our season, which is going on here with longer episodes. We will be back on Friday to record another one, but this was fun to do these little mini episodes. I hope we do more of this, Pat, as we see films in the theater.
I'm always down to talk first reactions with you, bud.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, have a good rest of your week. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you back here. Let us know if you see Elvis. Let us know what you think.
Bye.
Take care.